Welcome back for my 3 stars. So this is a longer list than we have had for the other two. So this is my meh. It's not like truly the worst, like there are some redeemable bits to these books, but also there's things that are definitely holding them back, and that's mostly what I'm going to be focusing on. And really, these are just kind of meh books. And so each one I'm only going to cover just a little bit, because I think it ended up being like 40 books that we're going to talk about, so we're just going to kind of try to quickly go through them. If you want the full discussions, of course, I will have them linked down below. To begin this list, we have Pendulum Magic for Beginners, Tap into Your Inner Wisdom by Richard Webster. Now, this book, I'm not like a big fan of pendulums anyways, and I think like I was trying to keep my own bias out of it because I've never had them work, really ever. Anytime I've actually tried to use it the way people say you can use them, never has worked. You ask your basic questions, sometimes they're right, sometimes it's not. And, when you, like, the classic one is, like, you try and use your pendulum to, like, find something. It's never been right. Ever. So, like, I have a thing of, like, I just don't trust pendulums anyways, but I was trying to take my, like, bias out. But, like, he's telling you to use your pendulum on the most frivolous of things. Like, if you can't walk into a store and decide what book to buy, and you need to whip out your pendulum to figure that out, I think you need some help. To be honest, that is relying way too heavily on any tool ever. You should be able to make decisions on your own. And then also, he moves from just frivolous things like that to potentially very dangerous. And the one in particular was that he mentioned that you could use your pendulum to check for food allergies if, like, let's say you're allergic to, like, dairy or gluten or whatever, and you use your pendulum to decide if it's in there or not. That is bad. Depending on how severe your allergy is, that could potentially put you in the hospital or in a grave. So just no, like that is super dangerous. There's a time and a place for religion and spiritual practices and things. And then there's a time to just live in the modern world and realize that sometimes they have limitations, and that is included. Like a food allergy could kill you or severely injure you, depending on how severe it is. But like, why are you encouraging people to think this is a good idea? But other than that, like, it's okay. But again, I struggle with pendulums anyways, so it's just one of those where I'm like, I'm trying to be generous, but sometimes I look at my reviews and I'm like, I probably want to put that lower nowadays, actually. So anyways, there is our first book. Next is The Witch's Book of Self-Care, Magical Ways to Pamper, Soothe, and Care for Your Body and Spirit by Murphy-Hiscock. I really don't love her name. I know it's like the most random thing, first of all, but anytime I've been working on these lists, I'm like, why did you not change your last name? Why did you pick that last name? You're an author. You can pick your name. That's totally besides the point, but anytime I have to write that, it's just, like, there's certain last names that we could just, as an entire, like, globe, could just, like, annex and be like, we could just not have that be a name. That could just be an option, because it makes you question when you look at, like, the origin of names. I don't want to know. Anyways, that is such a side tangent, but just anytime I've had to look up, because I've had her a few times, and it's like, that name, why did you hyphenate to that? Just not related, but anyways, there's that. But anyways, so onto the actual book. So this is really, much like a lot of the self-care books, it is not for anyone who is, like, neurodivergent. So if you have ADHD, autism, bipolar, depression, anxiety, CPTSD, any of the things, really, this is not for you. This is like your most basic, generic advice and information you could Google. And the major premise of this book is just do it, which is not helpful for most people who are struggling already. Like, self-care and, like, just tell yourself to just go do these things doesn't work if you struggle with the most basic human tasks, like brush your teeth twice a day. Can you brush your hair once a day? Can you take a shower semi-regularly? We're not even talking about the crazy people who try and do it daily. We're talking, like, maybe 2 to 3 times a week. Can you handle that? Maybe. Like, it is not for those people. This book is just, like, if you're, again, having an off day, I feel like that's what most of these self-care books are, is like, if you're having a slightly off day, here's some, like, things to do, which is basically just do it. Next, we have got The Magic of Food, Legends, Lore, and Spellcraft by Scott Cunningham. While I do love him as an author, this is not one of the books that I really enjoyed, and honestly, it is a bit dated. So, like other books from Scott Cunningham, it's very well researched, but there's a lot of topics that just wouldn't be mentioned nowadays. So, like, one of the big things is, like, random little, like, points that he'll, like, just briefly mention or kind of point out that nowadays we're a lot more sensitive about talking. And it's, like, weight loss, diet that, like, boomers and Gen X usually will talk about. And, like, maybe, like, the earlier millennials, but, like, later millennials and Gen Z and probably now Gen Alpha, because they're starting to get to that age, like, we don't talk about those things. We don't usually joke about those things. It's a very sensitive topic nowadays that older generations just didn't have that. And instead it just kind of pushes like a semi-unhealthy narrative. So like if that's a topic that's going to bug you, probably not for you. And then the other thing is that he has bias quite a bit. And one in particular that was just like, what? Like, what is going on? Is that you have to use like fresh ingredients. So like you have to have fresh garlic, because if you have dried garlic, all of the magic is gone. And it's like, I can guarantee you if I use garlic that is in powdered form or fresh, it's the same. It's gonna be the same. Like, I don't know why having like powdered lavender versus fresh lavender is fine, but if you're cooking, it's suddenly a problem. It's just a really random thing, but it was just like, why? And just, again, old biases that I don't think are really pushed nowadays, but at the time, a little bit more. Next, we have got Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain. I don't know how to say that last name, but this book is kind of your generic, like, Law of Attraction, The Secret kind of a book, and, like, the first bit of it wasn't, like, horrible, but then it inevitably goes to the usual routes that we expect. So we've got our toxic positivity, that anything bad that happens to you is your fault. Like, you manifested all of the bad things in your life, and it's like, that comes from a place of so much privilege, whether it's wealth privilege or social status, you know, from skin color, where you were born, like, health, money, everything. There's just so much privilege involved that it's like, oh, yes, I did manifest wanting to be poor. Or I did want to manifest having, like, physical ailments all the time. Yes, that's totally what I wanted. Again, toxic positivity, victim blaming a bit. And then also that every single thing ever can be fixed by visualizing it. Which we know it has some power, but it's sort of like if you have a major surgery and instead of getting to have, like, the good medication to help manage your pain, they give you, like, a Tylenol. And you're like, that is not really, matching to what it needs to be. That's when you get, like, the other good things and you kind of combine it. At a best, that's what visualization would be for fixing your problems. Next, we have got Natural Druidry by Kristoffer Hughes. I still don't know about this book. So it is, like, it's so hard to figure out who and what the book is supposed to be. Is it for a beginner? Is it for an intermediate? He claims that it's not a training book, but then it's very much a training book, but then it's also a memoir, and the whole book just rambles so much that you're just left confused by the end. Then we have got Witch in the Kitchen, Magical Cooking for All Seasons by Cait Johnson. So one of the things that stood out was that you're supposed to connect to your appliances. And as a witch, I realized that we have some out there ideas, but that was a bit out there even for me to be like, yes, I must connect to the microwave. That's a little weird. And then, like, there were very few recipes personally I would ever enjoy. Like, it is very health conscious. There's quotes in there of what health conscious is going to look like to people. But think of, like, the diet books that right around this time of the year are going to be really popular, where it's like, you don't need to add sweetener. Like, the apple is the sweetness that you need. And you're like, no, actually, I would like to add some kind of sweetener, like sugar or, like, maple syrup or something. But no, you're just supposed to use the natural sweetness in the item as the sweetener. And it's like, oh no. So, like, the recipes are, like, very much, if you're health conscious, this would probably be good. But also there's just a lot of things that I personally don't like. Like, I don't want to have, like, a savory pumpkin. That sounds disgusting. And like, I'm not a big fan of squash in general, so there's a lot of those kinds of recipes where it's like, oh no. So like, some of that I know is a me problem. But the fact that the recipes are also, again, trying to be very health conscious was like, just not it for me. Continuing along, we have got Awakening to the Spirit World, The Shamanic Path of Direct Revelation by Sandra Ingerman and Hank Wesselman. So this is like a okay-ish book as a very introductory like book to pick up on shamanism. And other than that, it reads like a college lecture. So if you are okay with that, it's probably, again, very brief intro of like, all right, you can kind of get an idea. But they definitely talk at you. And it really, if it was like an audio version, I feel like you would just feel like you're at college again or university. And having them talking at you and you're just supposed to sit there and like quietly take notes, that's how this entire book feels. And we have got The Magic of Flowers, A Guide to Their Metaphysical Uses and Properties by Tess Whitehurst. So this is a big reference book, and you would think a book talking about flowers would include this, but they didn't, and that was any kind of diagram. Picture, drawing, something. There's literally none. And it's just one of those things, and it's like, for that particular kind of a book, why didn't you, not on every page necessarily, but some, would have been nice. It would have really fit like the publishing standard of that kind of a book. The expectation has been set. I don't know why they didn't do that. And that's not necessarily on the author because it's traditionally published, so she doesn't have a lot of control over that. But like the editor and the publishing house, what happened? Because like that's just really random to not include any kind of diagram, picture, drawing, something to go along with it, at least at some point. And then the next thing is that there's no like warning for like dangerous or toxic, because like there's a couple that I had looked up that were toxic that was not mentioned. So like it gives you ideas, but like you've got to research everything a little bit more before you just like trust this author. Next we have got Wiccan Mysteries, Ancient Origins and Teachings by Raven Grimassi. I'm not 100% sure on that pronunciation. So this book is really traditional Wicca, and it's really like, again, old school Wicca, but there's like this huge bias against eclectic Wiccans. And whenever there's a big bias from an author, it's not my favorite. Like, it's fine to have your opinions, but like, it does come off as a bit of like better than thou, like, well, this way's better, and how dare the eclectics be? And it's like, that's not great. Then we have got The Essential Book of Wicca, Powerful Practices from the Magical Craft by Marie Bruce. This is a trendy witch book. It really doesn't go into any depth at all on any topic. So to say it's in like an essential book is like, not really. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Next, we have got Runes, the God's Magical Alphabet book by Bianca Luna. Now, this was a very small book. And I mean, it's like it's such a tiny book. And then you have to take into account that every other page is a full picture page. So it's even less pages than what you see. And so it's like, it's really, really small. And it's pretty basic on the information. Some of it I kind of was questioning the interpretations. I'm not like very well versed at the runes, but some of them I'm like, I don't know. And the only thing that it was kind of interesting from this book is that it includes questions to ask yourself when that rune comes up. Haven't really seen that in any other book. That was kind of cool. But other than that, really wasn't worth it. Continuing along, we have got The Practical Witch's Spellbook for Love, Happiness, and Success by Cerridwen Greenleaf. She is not an author that I enjoy. So the thing that really makes this book have as many stars as it does is because the artist has so much skill. Like, the artwork in here is phenomenal. But other than that, the actual book is not that great. The explanations are beyond not helpful and leave everyone that I have talked to more confused than when we started. Like, I specifically picked topics that I knew, like, my family didn't know much of anything about, had them read the section, and they were more confused after reading it than before, which is not great for an informational book. Then we have got Llewellyn's 2022 Magical Almanac, Practical Magic for Everyday Living by, of course, Llewellyn. And so this collection, I've liked some of them, and this was one that I didn't like just about any part of it. So a lot of the authors that contributed to this particular one, I'm not a fan of to begin with. So that obviously is going to make it not that enjoyable if you don't already like the authors, or at least have no opinion. And then if you know you're going to not like them because you already have proven, like, you just don't jive, then the whole book is mostly written by them, you're probably not going to jive with it. And then, like, there was really nothing interesting in this edition. Like, there was nothing in particular that was like, wow, you should read this. Like, none of the topics were anything I was interested in at all. But, like, the only thing it's got going for it is that it's good exposure for a variety of topics. So, like, it's not necessarily this one in particular, but just in general. If you can check your local library and read at least, like, one or two of the almanacs, it's a good idea just to get some ideas, because they talk about a variety of topics. But, like, this in particular just wasn't that great. Continuing along, we have got Manifestation Magic, 21 rituals, spells, and amulets for abundance, prosperity, and wealth. I have absolutely no idea how to say the author's name, so I'm just gonna not even try. But this is, like, kind of intermediate because not a lot is explained, but it just wasn't great. And, like, the flow of the writing, I just could not stand. And, like, the way the author writes just comes across as very pretentious. And I just did not like them at all. Then we have got Wild Witchcraft, Folk Herbalism, Garden Magic, and Foraging for Spells, Rituals, and Remedies. That is such a mouthful of a title. But yeah, that book. So this one I've seen really heavily pushed on ads and such this year. And a lot of people just, anywhere I look, it's just kind of there. And really, even though the very long title says that it's going to be for a variety of things, of like folk herbalism, it wasn't really there. Garden magic, wasn't really there. Foraging for spells, rituals, and remedies, yes, this is just on foraging. If that's your thing, this is your book. I'm not a big fan of foraging because, like, there's just a lot of reasons. And I go over it in the video, but, like, just most of us don't live in an area where it is safe and legal to go foraging. And really big emphasis on the safe part of it, because, I don't know, maybe I'm a little biased because where I live is just city as far as the eye can see, and it's just expanding more and more and more and more and more and more. Like, the Utah population is just exploding, and it's just houses everywhere, so, like, you can't just, like, go forage outside. And, like, our waterways aren't always safe, and there's a lot of warnings, like, hey, don't go to this lake, because, like, you'll die if you go near it. So that kind of thing just makes me very hesitant to ever do foraging, so it's just not a topic I particularly care about. But it felt like this book could have been more than just foraging, and that's really all this book was. This next one, I'm still so disappointed that it wasn't what I wanted it to be. So this is Bending the Binary, Polarity Magic in a Non-Binary World by Deborah Lipp. I really wanted it to be what it was not. Because, like, when I looked at that title, you look at the cover, in a non-binary world, I'm thinking, like, okay, sweet, we're moving beyond this binary that has been placed within witchcraft and Wicca, where everything has to be split. Is it masculine or is it feminine? And that's something that, like, I'm still exploring in my own brain. I don't really consider myself non-binary, but, like, it's a topic that is really intriguing. Because, like, how much of it is just, like, social construct, and how much do we need to carry on, and blah, blah, blah. And it's, like, it's a huge thing in my brain that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. It's one of my projects to focus on and figure out in the next year. But, like, this book didn't do that. Instead, it's like, well, instead of calling it masculine and feminine, you can call it this or that. And it's like, but that's the same thing, really. And while the author tried to be kind of inclusive, really dropped the ball on us ace peoples, because we're just not included. And I also kind of feel like the non-binary people would also be excluded. Again, when I think back on this book, it's like, we didn't remove the binary for the non-binary part. And to say that it's, like, polarity magic in a non-binary world, we are in a binary world. Like, what universe are you living in? It's very recent that people are starting to, like, fight against it. So, like, no. But that's a big point of the book that still bothers me to this day, The other thing I had actually forgot about until I rewatched my own review because I forgot to make notes on most of these. I'm doing better for next year, but like all of these, be grateful. I had to go through and find all of my old notes and rewatch my old videos to make sure that I didn't miss any like vital points that I was like, this should be a thing I should mention. But I forgot about this point, which also, once I remembered it, it's like, that really was annoying. Instead of where most books will pick a lane of like, we're just going to refer to everything as Wicca, or we're just going to refer to everything as witchcraft, or everything is going to be pagan. No, it's just P word for whatever the religion is. And it's like, you literally couldn't pick any other better option. Like, P dash word. Just so much ick. I didn't realize this was going to happen, but here we are. We have got a double back-to-back of Deborah Lips. So we have her other book, which was The Study of Witchcraft, A Guide to Advanced Wicca. This is not an advanced Wicca book. It's really a beginner book, and that's putting it lightly, because this book just reads like I would take notes to make a video. Like, there's no depth to it. It's almost bullet points, and just really basic, like, notes of whatever the topic is, kind of rambly. And really the only thing this book has got going for it is it has a really good list of recommended books. Other than that, it's really not worth it. But if you can like check it out from the library and just write notes of the books it tells you to read, you'd probably be doing pretty good. Next, we have got Green Witchcraft, Magical Ways to Walk Softly on the Earth by Marie Bruce. I didn't realize, because I didn't read her like frequently back to back, I don't like her as an author. Like, again, there's just something about when you like collect your mega list of things that it's like, oh, I actually don't think I like you as an author. And I don't know if I've already picked her up again, because I have a tendency to not look at author names when I grab books, especially when I released The ADHD Husband when I went to the library. I went to pick up 2, and I walked out of there with like 14 books, like right before the holidays. So yeah, I like right as I'm recording this in the office, I've got a massive stack of books next to me, and it's like, I really hope I'm not going to see her name again, because I accidentally picked up Jason Mankey like twice, so that's great for my life, because I didn't like him. So it's like, well, I guess I'm giving you another shot. But anyways, Marie Bruce is just an author I don't think I actually enjoy. So for this one in particular, like, and really any of the Green Witchcraft books, there's so many that are just not good. That it's like, I have like 1 or 2 that like very distinctly stick out in the brain, and the rest are like, you could just not pick up this book and be fine. So this one in particular has so many pictures, and they don't really match to the topic, and they're just random stock photos, and they're so big and so much that it felt like they were just trying to space out this book, which wasn't big to begin with. It felt like a kid's book. And the pictures are taking up like a page and a half, and then you have a huge border around so that there's just a little bit of text. And when you actually read the text, it's so surface level and just trendy beginner witch. It just really wasn't that great. Continuing along, we have got Bird Magic, Wisdom of the Ancient Goddess for Pagans and Wiccans by Sandra, and I don't know how to say her last name, but this is like kind of an intermediate book. Like, you need to know some basics before you really jump into this. But my thing is that, like, this book is very romanticized for the past. And we know that some books do this and some don't. And I read this, like, right after reading Triumph of the Moon, and it was like, oh my god. Because I personally can't stand rewriting history to this extent. Because I don't love it. And, like, I don't love where we're just, like, adding things that really weren't there and trying to make up things instead of just saying this is how we interpret it now, which is fine. We can change how we believe and, like, do things. Like, we've done it for other parts of our lives. It's fine to say we did it wrong in the past and here's how we could look at it now. And, like, again, the romanticized history is just, like, you know, we see it a lot in the witchy books. And then the actual information in here is still, like, iffy at best. Then we have got A Brief Guide to Celtic Myths and Legends by Martin Whittock. And this book still left me more confused than when I started. So I've been wanting to know more about, like, Celtic mythology, like, specifically, like, the British area. So, like, Wales. Apparently Scotland has their own thing going on. Irish. Like, I would love, and, like, the Anglo-Saxon. Like, I want to know their myths. I would love to have a little bit more knowledge on that and like the different regions and like how they're similar but different, how that all works out. Because it's like, it's so small in comparison to like where I live. Like, it's a big topic that's not related to witchcraft at all, but like when people on like TikTok and things talk about like how big the US is in comparison to like people in Europe, where it's like, y'all, like, you act like it is so far, and I drive further than that on my commute every day. And so when I think about all of these niche little groups in such a teeny tiny area, I don't know if it's like it would fit in the size of Utah, but I'm pretty sure it's like kind of close. Like, I think Texas was like at least big enough for all of it, if not like double, like just to give context. So I'm so curious how like distinct these little areas got when they're so close together. And so I want to know more. And then I got this book and I'm more confused than when I started. I don't know a lot about these myths. It's not the ones you were taught. Like, we were taught Greek and then Egyptian. We didn't even learn Roman, but you kind of started to learn Roman indirectly because Greek and Roman are like almost the same. But like, you didn't learn about like Irish myths or Welsh myths. And like, I'm learning on Duolingo, not sponsored. My husband has ADD and decided to tell me that I needed to learn a language. And I was like, fine, I'm not going to pick like really anything that I would ever need, like Spanish. No, I'm going to pick Irish. So I've been learning Irish, which is like, I don't understand this language at all. But eventually I would love to be able to like actually read these names and know how to pronounce them and have a general idea. But that's going to take some time because I still don't understand why one word in English is like 4 words in Irish. It's a magical journey. Anyways, back to the point. So this book, the myths aren't really told to you. They're just kind of summarized. But like, it's so boring when it's summarized too. And like, I feel like mythology needs to come to life. And I still compare them to Neil Gaiman because he made myths fun, which I think is how they were supposed to be. Next, we have got The Real Witch's Handbook, A Complete Introduction to the Craft by Cait West. Once again, very basic intro to Wicca, and this book heavily pushes for you to eventually find a coven. Another one of those authors that I'm just starting to realize I don't think I like their work is Cindy Dale. So in Llewellyn's Little Book of Empathy by her, it is so repetitive. Like, that was my biggest takeaway, is that this book just constantly repeats the same points. The exercises are pretty much the same. It really could have been shrunk down quite a bit, or add more variety in there to make this book good. Next is Soul Flow by Kristen Martin. And this book was one that it's weird to realize, but having read this book and been in a lot of discussions, it's just like, it's really weird to realize like how like, whoa, that poverty line is so above me right now. Because like, and like listening to like, this is such a random side tangent, but it relates to this book. And it's just this realization of like, just how poor you are. Because like, you listen to like the Am I the Asshole stories, and it's just like random little throwouts that you're like, oh, does that mean I'm poor? I feel like this is making me feel poorer. And they're not like richity rich. They're like middle class. And you're like, oh no. And so like having that in the background, when you read this book, it is such a place of privilege. Because I remember reading through this book, and that was all I could focus on. And when I still think back on it, it's all I could focus on. Is like, she came from such privilege. And I still occasionally check in on her stuff, and it's like, not as much anymore, because I'm not a huge fan of people who post like their children online. Like, I feel like that should just be illegal. But like, she's doing that more and more now that she has kids, and it's like, But like in the book, she talks about how like she wanted to get a new car, and in her vlogs, she's like upgrading like really expensive, basically new car to another really expensive brand new car. And I'm sitting over here like, I thought my car was hella expensive, and like, I think that one's like triple the cost of mine, and mine is fancy. I'm like, my truck is not that fancy. It was like revolutionary to have the detector when you back up, not a camera, just a detector to be like, hey, there's something. And if you have a trailer, it just yells at you the whole time. But like, anyways, so like, and in the book, she talks about how it's like, well, I'm going to value myself. So I'm going to get me a first class ticket because my time is valuable. So I need to be able to work on the plane. And I'm going to go on this 2-week trip to Bali. And you're just sitting there like, I am poor. Because, like, I'm so glad that you have the money and the ability to, like, go have a spa day and have first class tickets where it's like, is it cheaper to drive there and take 3 days and stay at Motel 6? Or is it worth having the itty bitty squishy seats where you're like, wow, I don't fit. This is great. This is so squishy. I just am going to just sardine in here and we're just not going to move till like everyone else is off the plane because it's squishy. Like, it's such a place of privilege throughout this entire book. And, like, I feel like you would only be able to do anything that she really talks about in this book when you are, like, middle class to, like, upper middle class. Because, and I don't feel like any of my audience is there. If you are, hello, hi, you could buy my books. But, like, I feel like most of my audience, we're in the same, like, economic standards of, like, we love when there's a sale and it's, like, we're gonna head over to the Walmart or, like, Dollar General and, like, our big expenditures are, like, if we, like, just drop, like, $100, that's kind of a big deal. And especially on, like, non-essentials. And to her, she's off buying really expensive cars and buying an expensive house and, like, these expensive trips. And so her message gets really, like, almost like it's set aside for people who have money. And if you don't have money, that's not going to really be applicable to you because, like, you can't do those things because you're poor. And that's the biggest thing that I could take away from her book and really just her message in general. Because, like, her classes and, like, her, like, coaching and stuff is, like, so absorbently expensive. And it's a thing that happens in, like, the New Age and Witch community that's just sad of how much these people are just, like, extorting you for so much money. That was, like, such a side tangent, but basically that's the premise of that book. So let's move on to Wicca for Beginners, A Guide to Wiccan Beliefs, Rituals, Magic, and Witchcraft by Lisa Chamberlain. Now, typically, I've loved her books, and then I hit a patch of, like, I didn't, and this is one of them. So this was so generic, and everything was just briefly covered, and it really didn't match up to her other work, where she usually includes, like, little details and things that make it really stand out, and you're like, wow, you really know how to pack a punch with a small book, but actually say a lot? That wasn't the case this time. Which leads into our next one, which is also by her, but this is Wicca, Year of Magic, from the Wheel of the Year to the Cycles of the Moon, Magic for Every Occasion. Again, it just didn't match up to her usual standards, where typically, even if you're not Wiccan, those books are very applicable to witches and pagans, and then this time it was just Wicca. No extra details like she normally does. Continuing along, we have got Llewellyn's Little Book of Halloween by Mickey Mueller. So this book is American Halloween. So if you don't live here, it might be interesting to, like, get to see what it's like over here. Because from what I can gather, Halloween is not as big of a deal anywhere else. Like, that is specifically, like, a very American thing that we're like, hell yeah, all the Halloween. We're gonna have all these big things. Trick-or-treating is huge. You've got haunted houses, you've got corn mazes, you've got pumpkin patches. And, like, everywhere decks out. Like, the amusement parks go crazy. So, like, it very much is, like, American Halloween. But also, this book feels like such a knockoff right down to how the points are brought up from a documentary that I have watched many a times because I was the history nerd when I was growing up. I loved to watch the History Channel back in the day. I loved to watch documentaries. Like, that was my thing for a long time. And so one of them from the History Channel was called something like The History of Halloween. And literally, like, we watched it in school. I watched it at home. I think I actually have a copy of, like, the DVD somewhere. But, like, it seems like she almost took the notes, like, one after the other from that documentary and just talked about it. Like, when you were, like, in, like, middle school, when you would, like, watch a thing or read a book and then you had to summarize it in your own words, kind of like that. Then we have got my first witchy book that I ever read, which was weird to reread and honestly still had the same points, really, which was the Everything Wicca and Witchcraft book, Rituals, Spells, and Sacred Objects for Everyday Magic by Skye Alexander. Like, there was a few pages that were interesting, but really most of the topics in this book were covered better by other people. whether it was people before this book or after this book. Because, again, I've read a lot of the beginner books. So at some point, you've got to actually stand out from the crowd. And this just really didn't. Then we have got Llewellyn's 2021 Witches Spell a Day Almanac, Holidays and Lore, Spells, Rituals, and Meditations by, of course, Llewellyn. So this one, again, these are like, you could kind of maybe apply it to all of them, but I did review each one individually. So for this particular one, it felt extremely repetitive in the spells and the topics that were brought up. There were so many: protection and house and blessing and cleansing. Like, it was all kind of just the same over and over and over. And even then, the spells were all pretty lackluster. Then we have got Thrifty Witchery, Magic for the Penny Pinching Practitioner by Vincent Higginbotham? I don't know that last name. And Martha Kirby Capo. So this is just another beginner book. It didn't really focus as much on just thrifty witchery, which is a bummer, because, like, it would be a great topic. But no, it's mostly a beginner book and just, like, occasional mentions of, like, how to focus on doing that with thrifting, which really isn't that complex. Like, I still don't know how they're making full books on the topic, because, like, to me, it really doesn't seem like that revolutionary, but maybe it is to some people that they don't know how to do that. Whatever. But, like, the weird thing about this book is that the one author, and I think it was Martha, but I could be wrong. I'm like 98% certain that it was Martha, but she co-wrote this book. And I think it was Vincent, who had come from very poor upbringings. You know, he had been homeless and couch surfing, so, like, he understood the thrifting part of that. Martha, on the other hand, from, like, the way it's described in the book, is definitely someone with a decent amount of wealth. And, like, I don't know if it would, because honestly, my worldview of what was poverty and what isn't is, like, really getting questioned in my life right now. But, like, it feels like she's definitely middle class to upper middle class to maybe even moving into, like, the rich. But, like, definitely not for the intended audience of this book. It's not rich people who are going to be picking up thrifty witchery at all. It's gonna be us poor folk who are, like, living in apartments, and, like, if you don't get one paycheck, your life is screwed. Like, those kinds of people. They're the ones that this book should be for. So it felt really kind of off that one of the authors actively talks about their privilege while talking about this topic. That just felt really weird. Like, there are so many authors in the witchcraft community that are struggling, who have money struggles. Why didn't you pick, like, literally any of them, and instead you picked the rich person? That just felt really off for the book. Once again, with the green books, so Green Witchcraft, A Practical Guide to Discovering the Magic of Plants, Herbs, Crystals, and Beyond by Paige Vanderbeck. So again, I really haven't found that many good Green Witchcraft books, and this was kind of the same. So this book actually kind of is almost a little bit worse than some of them. So it has a warning, but it's on a page that I don't know that anyone besides me reads, which is the publication page. Like, I don't think any normal person picks up a book and reads the publication page. I think that's, like, a me and, like, a few other really random people in the world who do that. Because, like, that's where I've caught a few red flags here and there. But in this book in particular, that's the only place that there's a very generic warning, and that's it. And when you're talking about green witchcraft, you need to have a lot of warnings, like, hey, if you're pregnant, if you're nursing, don't do this. That's a pretty easy warning to add that's just not there. Really, this book just ends up being another generic green witchcraft with nothing that really makes it stand out. Continuing along, we have got The Modern Witchcraft Book of Natural Magic, Your Guide to Crafting Charms, Rituals, and Spells from the Natural World by Judy Ann Nock. Now, this book is more of, like, it was hard to really determine, like, who the audience should be, but it seems like it's kind of like the intermediate, like the beginning of an intermediate, because it's like, it talks about the beginner topics, but it's more of like a refresher on the topics rather than, like, in depth. And really, this whole book is so rambly that, like, the best way to describe it is, like, if you've ever been around somebody who's stoned and, like, really high, and they're discussing how the universe works, and, like, super duper, like, out there. And you're just like, oh, okay. And you're the sober one sitting there going, okay, so I'm gonna leave. Bye. That's kind of how this book felt the entire time. Then we have got Wicca, A Modern Practitioner's Guide, Your Guide to Mastering the Craft. That title is a mouthful. By our favorite, Arin Murphy-Hiscock. I've already talked about the name, but it's, again, every time I see it, I'm like, why? So this book, it's really just yet another Witchcraft 101 book, a Wicca 101 book. Nothing to make it stand out. Continuing along, we have got Llewellyn's Little Book of Life Between Lives by the Newton Institute. Now, this book, I really wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, and it's still, it's weird. So it's like a New Age book on reincarnation, and I don't believe really what they're saying, and I have a hard time believing the stories because they are so out there every time. And I just, the skeptic in me can't sit aside for this book. It was in the forefront. It was the driver, because it seems so unrealistic. And, like, the other thing about it is that it's written by this institute and is kind of constantly promoting itself. Like, all of the examples, all the stories, which is, like, all this book is from their institute. And that it wasn't quite as bad as the Strength Finders book we talked about, like, yesterday. But it's kind of close, because it's like, it feels like promo for their thing. And it just was like, why did this need to exist? Because it just constantly referencing back to themselves just felt really off for a kind of a book like this. Then we come back to Cindy Dale. Once again, I don't actually like this author, but we've got Llewellyn's Little Book of Chakras. So this is one of those books that it's like, it's kind of advanced, but like kind of not. Definitely you want to be an intermediate, both as a witch and on the topic, because she adds some weird points that I don't think are very traditional. And she kind of mentions traditional things, but then she also does a lot of her own kind of really diverting from the traditional things that it just would leave a beginner kind of confused. It left me confused because, like, first of all, I didn't know ages were associated with the chakras. That's a little weird. Didn't know that. But then she changes the ages, and I'm more along the lines of the traditional versions. And she's going with traditional Hindu. I guess there's other places that use chakras, but we're most common and, like, most well-known is the Hindu version. But she changes things very weirdly. So this is just one of those books that it's like, you probably need to read something besides this. Then we come to one of the authors that I don't really love, and I'm really disappointed that I have a bunch of books from that I still need to read because I've already got it, so I might as well. But it's Jason Mankey. We have Transformative Witchcraft, The Greater Mysteries. So the way he writes, and it's been consistent in the few books that I've read from him so far. We'll see if it continues with the next ones in the new year. But he writes like he's trying to prove that he's smart. But when you do that, it proves more that you're not as smart as you're trying to claim to be. And you, like, anyone, like, if you read, like, okay, for example, again, I come back to this Triumph of the Moon, you can tell, like, he's a really smart dude and isn't trying to sound smart. It's just how he talks. And, like, when you're trying to sound really smart and really not like how you actually speak, it's very noticeable, especially when you read as many books as I have. Like, eventually you start to notice patterns. And this is just one of those where he's trying to sound like he's so much more than what he is. And, like, the book rambles so much that it really kind of proves that point, because he can't organize his thoughts that well. It's so rambly. It also heavily promotes covens. And I still don't know what this book was trying to be at all, which is just never a good sign for a book. So the next one is Simply Wicca, A Beginner's Guide to the Craft of the Wise by Lisa and Anton Stewart. Now, this book is mostly traditional Wicca. It's very coven-based. And the thing that really stood out from this one is I feel like it's dancing the line of cultural appropriation. Now, it's not from the culture we usually talk about, which is, like, Native American or, like, Mexican or any of, like, the many African countries, which usually just gets lumped into Africa, much like Native American. But, like, again, usually those are the ones that you think of. Sometimes it might be like Chinese or Japanese or even sometimes like Vietnamese. Like, there's certain places in the world that you just think cultural appropriation and you think of their culture. You don't usually think of the Welsh, but to me, this book was really dancing the line of cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. And it just left me feeling just bad taste in the mouth kind of after this book. Continuing along, we have got another one by Jason Mankey. Again, not my favorite. So Llewellyn's Little Book of Yule. This should have been Llewellyn's Little Book of Christmas, and it would have been better. The title just proves that it was not correct because there's very little on actual Yule in this book. It's really a history of Christmas with the Christ in Christmas. Like, it's not really for pagans. It's not a lot about pagan history. And it's definitely not about, like, it feels like you're just trying to take modern Christian Christmas and put paganism into it, kind of ignoring the fact that a lot of that comes from a variety of different pagan backgrounds. And it puts a lot more of like, well, we got Christmas from the Christians, guys. And it's like, true, but not, but like, oh my God. So just, again, I don't like his writing to begin with. And if it would have said A Little Book of Christmas, it would have been fine. And this book I judge a little bit more harshly because Llewellyn already has a book on Yule that talked about all of the things that it should have talked about in this book. So it's like, it's already there. Why did we publish twice? And like really not add to the conversation. And again, if it would have been titled Christmas, that would have made way more sense because it's so heavily focused on the Christian history rather than the pagan history and like even modern pagan practices. Because you could write a whole book on that. Pagans around the world celebrate Yule very differently. Like, where does your 13 days of Yule start? Do you even do 13 days of Yule? What day do you celebrate? How do you celebrate? What deities do you celebrate? There's a bunch that you could make a whole book on. But instead, we're focusing on the like Christian history of Christmas. So throughout this year, I eventually hit a point where I started to post some things that were just Patreon exclusives because I was trying to figure out what I want to do with my Patreon. And I think I've kind of solidified what I want it to be now, at least for a while. And so this was one of the Patreon exclusive books, so I'm just going to talk about it briefly. You can always find it over on Patreon. But this book is The Scarcity Brain, Fix Your Craving Mindset and Rewire Your Habits to Thrive with Enough by Michael Easter. He doesn't answer that question. So he doesn't tell you how to fix your craving mindset. He doesn't tell you how to rewire your habits to thrive with enough. He doesn't tell you how to do that. He just tells you his experience about trying to figure this out. And, like, he is just extreme examples. And in the end, it did kind of leave with this note of, like, he goes and talks to a Christian monk. And, of course, Christian was the answer. Kind of-ish. Again, it really didn't actually answer the question. But the examples in this book are just so extreme. And also just, like, so out of touch. Like, the perfect diet is from how conveniently this random tribe that also has access to so many foods that I really don't trust that was just like natively there. But they claim that they weren't touched by the outside world and the industrialization and such. And they have the perfect diet, but it's also like they're a tribe that has to like constantly move and doesn't have desk jobs. And, you know, like, it was just so bad. So he tries the diet because he describes himself as like a round American, and then he's like 180 pounds and drops down to 175. And then he has to worry about his calorie intake because he's going to lose too much weight. And it's like, bro, 5 pounds is like not going to make or break your life. Like, that is how much water you ingested, really. Like, let's just be honest. Like, that fluctuation is like, did you weigh with a jacket on? That's not enough to really be freaking out about. And it just other random points where he's just so, I don't know, it felt very out of touch. And again, didn't actually answer the question. Because, like, then he's also, like, he went to, like, interview, like, a drug lord kind of vibe in, like, Afghanistan. And it was, like, a super sketch area and super dangerous. And you're like, cool, I guess. And then there's, like, this fake casino that he goes to in Vegas that's, like, actually a scientific lab, and they're studying how people like gamble. And again, they're just really extreme examples all over the place. And like one lady who only lives off of like roadkill and like just randomly finding dead things and just lives on the mountain for most of the year and then like works just a little bit. It's a lot of a book. And I love the idea of this. I wanted to learn about it. And then there's no answer, and it's just him rambling about him going and interviewing random people to prove his point that he never actually proves the point for. Next, we have got The Modern Witch's Guide to Magical Self-Care, 36 Sustainable Rituals for Nourishing Your Mind, Body, and Intuition by Tanae Stewart. Did you guess that self-care was not going to be actually that helpful? Because if you did, you win. Because, yeah, it's very basic self-care. Like, this book just read like a BuzzFeed article on self-care. And honestly, I use BuzzFeed as my fill-in word because that's the brand that I think of. But honestly, I feel like you could fit it in with Vogue or Cosmopolitan or like Women Today or any of those other kind of like trendy kind of books and magazines and articles and websites and such. Like, it was so surface level. However, this is one of the 3 stars that the book itself would have been lower on the totem pole of ratings, but this section brought it up quite a ways, and that was the astrology. The astrology is very small in this book, but oh my god, it was so good. Like, I really, really need this author to write an astrology book, because self-care was not good. It was so not a good topic for her to try and write. But when she talked about astrology, the writing just came to life, and it's like, whoa, bro, you actually know what you're good at that, right? That's what you need to do, which is weird, which is one of those times where it's like a 3-star really does fit between the two, doesn't it? Because sometimes they have redeeming qualities, but most of the time it's like, it's not like that as bad, but like it's still not great. But like, no, the astrology section for this one made this book. And then lastly, we have got The New Witch, Your Modern Guide to Witchcraft, Wicca, Spells, Potions, Magic, and More by Marie Jones. This is, yet again, another beginner book. And, like, there was, like, a couple sections that was actually like, okay, maybe it's good. Maybe I'm judging it too harshly, because I have read a lot of beginner books. And I was like, okay, there's a couple new points that you don't usually see. Cool. And then one line in particular, it was like, you know what? I don't think you can come up from this point. We're going to see if you go down, which they didn't. But, like, it knocked it down quite a ways, because it was like, really? And that, I was struggling to put this between a 2 and a 3 because of this line in particular. So it was on page 183. I don't know that I actually shared the full quote last time, but here we are. So the part that I took out, it's from a chapter talking about herbs and how great and magical they are. And it says, herbs are used in place of pills and pharmaceuticals that rely on chemicals and toxins. And then it goes off and blah, 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 on how great herbs are in comparison. But it's like, know your place. You are an author. You are not a doctor. You are not a nurse. You are not a pharmacist. You are not a scientist. You are not a chemist. You don't know nothing on this topic. Stop it. Because this is just fear-mongering and very misinformed to be trying to tell people that, but plants will solve your problems. Look at your pills and pharmaceuticals. They're just chemicals and toxins. And it just is so horrible. I don't know why authors think that they should include this information. I don't know why publishing houses allow this. It seems so dangerous to be adding this information in. And yes, it is just one line in particular that I pulled out, but still, other people are going to read that line and they might start to believe it and be like, oh my god, is it true? Is it chemicals? Is it toxic? No, it's not. But yet also it is, but anything is really a chemical. Like, I'm sure a sciencey person could explain this way better, but like, it's like giving the same vibe as this TikTok that I saw like today, that it just describes it perfectly, where it's like, there's like, there's a couple of fitness dudes that I follow that are constantly debunking like the other fitness guys that are like really just trying to fearmonger you, and it's the same exact vibes. So the original guy is saying how horrible and toxic and chemical fueled and all of that like cereal is. So he gets some cereal, he like mixes it with water, lets it get all mushy for like 20 minutes or whatever, and then he takes a magnet and is like, look, and then you can see all of the hardware, oh god, what did he call it? It was like the leftover hardware stuff or whatever, because it was gathering up the iron, and he's like, look, there's like iron in it. This is what they're feeding you. It's so terrible. And then, of course, promotes his own products and stuff. And the guy that I follow is like, bro, did you know that actually we eat iron? We eat metals. That's what we do. Not a lot, but still, modern technology should not be that difficult for you to find and research this. And that's the same vibe as this, where it's like, our pills and pharmaceuticals are technically made out of chemicals. Pretty sure. Because a chemical is like, remember from like chemistry that it's like random little tidbits that make up other things. And like, same with toxins. Water can be toxic. Did you know that? Did you know if you drink too much water, it's toxic and can kill you? Yep. So like anything in this world could technically be labeled as toxic. So it's little things like that when an author puts this line in there, I'm just like, you're so stupid. What are you doing? Why are you adding this? It is so harmful. Because there could be somebody who, you know, not to be rude, but is very gullible and is going to read that and start to believe that kind of a thing. And it's very dangerous. And I don't know why publishing houses, editors allow that kind of a thing to be written, because it's so harmful to people. Herbs aren't going to like replace your pills and your pharmaceuticals. Your herbs are not going to replace insulin. It's not going to replace your heart medication. It's not going to replace your cholesterol medication. It's not going to replace Tylenol. Like, it's not going to replace them. You use them together carefully because some of them counteract each other. So anyways, this book was like okay-ish up until that point. I was trying not to be too judgy, and then that just like plummeted it. But it didn't go worse than that. It didn't continue on that. It kind of just went back up to where it's like, meh. So that's why it's still living at a 3 instead of a 2. But still, it was pretty bad. So here we are at the end. My phone is now just glitching out because it's been recording for so long that it doesn't even show me where I'm at. But I think we're at about an hour. So I think I'm going to call it for this review thing of the 3 stars because it's getting long now. So thank you so much for watching this very long video. If you made it all the way to the end, congratulations. And I will see you all tomorrow for my 4-star books and then my 5-star books of 2023. Huge thank you to my patrons as always. If you want access to the exclusive content over there, always linked down below, as well as my books if you want to buy my books. And until next time, thank you so much for watching again this very long video, and I will see you all tomorrow. I think the rest of these are actually going to be pretty long because I think they're all right around the 40 book mark. I know one's like 50 books and then another I think is like around 42. So we've got a lot longer videos coming for the next couple days. So anyways, until next time, blessed be.